Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the CR Blueprint. On today's episode, we're going to discuss everything about architecture and about properties, how to get them up from the ground. And, hopefully from our guest today, you're going to see how you can get planning, what's the struggle in getting the planning, and why you need an architect next to you when you're doing this step. So today we have Briffa Phillips Architects, which is one of the best practice architects in St. Albans surrounding and all London as well. And today we have Mr. Matt Briffa, which is the head of the practice, and he's the best architect, awarded as well onto the new builds, especially, and heritage properties, conservation area. And we're going to listen to actually his story and how he gets to where he's today.
Thank you, Costello. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Matt, for accepting to be here.
No, you're very welcome.
We will discuss today a few points about architecture.
Yeah.
The one onto the agenda, in a way, it's what it inspired you to become an architect?
Inspired me? Well, it's a long story because I tried to be an artist. And at art school, my teachers were saying, "Why do you keep drawing buildings?" And so I applied for architecture. So this was something that I had an interest in drawing. It all came from drawings, really, and visiting buildings and living in beautiful houses.
That's great to hear that. That's great. Can you share with us your journey in architecture?
Yeah, as I say, I did very badly at school, obviously. Every architect suffers at school. And I went to do an art school, art foundation course, where I progressed to what was then an old polytechnic, because we used to value the polytechnic system, and they were good enough to take me on. So from polytechnic, I was lucky enough to be a year-out student for Arup Associates, which is one of the preeminent architectural firms in London at the time. Then went to the Bartlett UCL for a high dose of academia. And then really from then on, Costello, I worked with my father for a while. And when he retired, so I've been in my own business now, 33 years.
That's great. That's great. What is your first major project and what did you learn from it?
Okay, so we used to do, in those days, we did a lot of work for local authorities where we were working with engineers and contractors, actually, who needed architects. So we were doing leisure centres, big leisure centres in London, refurbishment projects, lots of social housing and schools. What did you learn? You learned how, I guess the value was a lot of our work was refurbishment work of existing buildings. So it was how you add value to an existing building and how you get the essence of a building and then make it work harder for the next stage of its life.
That's great to hear that. That's great. No, that's very good. One more question on you. How do you approach a new project from the concept to completion so the future client understands?
Well, you have to start somewhere. So every client's slightly different. So we talked about this a little bit before in the car.
Yes.
I mean, we offer a service. Our whole output is service orientated, and all our clients come in different guises. They're different people. They're from different backgrounds, whether they're a local authority or whether they're a private client, whoever they are. So I guess the first thing is to, and it's the most important part of any job. So the first step shows the way. It does with all these projects. So it's how do you define what it is that their requirements are? And it's understanding really the DNA of how they're thinking about something and how you can extract that and then show them the real value of their ideas. So it comes from their ideas and their requirement and how you shape their ideas in a very early way. So it is talking about viability in terms of what chance is this going to get for planning, for example, or, what are the technical issues? And overlaid with all of that, it's the sketch in imagination investment that you put in the mix of the practical and bureaucratic requirements that you have to satisfy.
Right, that's great. Yep. On your years of experience, I'm sure you had so many challenges, but what is today actually a bigger challenge to all the architects are facing?
Well, I mean, I do say silly things sometimes. So, I mean, obviously, to get your next job is the biggest challenge. No, I think the thing is to communicate the value of the service that you're offering. Um, all too often, architects perhaps are seen as being not an essential part of a construction project. There's lots of different procurement ways. You don't need an architect to build a building. So the challenge really is to communicate the value.
Yeah, you don't need an architect, but actually need it.
Look, I mean, let's be clear about this. I mean, anyone can design a building. I think a lot of architects think that only architects can design buildings. Of course, that's not true. You get Michelin chefs and you get people that cook, scrambled egg in their kitchen, and that really is a good analogy. So architects add value because architects are kind of in the center of all the issues.
Yeah.
So they're the people that give you the ability to glue everything together, but also, let's face it, save money for clients or see an opportunity to how to build in a different way that might be quicker or cheaper, or look at a site and say, well, you think you can get 3 houses here. Well, we think we can get 12. So, an architect, is the person that is in the middle of the table, communicating all those issues.
That's good. So all the clients, if they're looking for a new build, you are the right person to give the right advice to them. On your org day to day, how do you find actually a balance between creativity with practically in your design, actually, all the creativity in design?
It's a fantastic question, that, Costello, because we're a studio. We think of ourselves as a studio. We are a practice. So there's the professional element with being a practice and safeguarding clients' interests. But we are a studio, and we like to push boundaries in terms of using materials, in terms of thinking about space. And that overlaying practical issues is sometimes a thing that maybe architects aren't always as good at doing. And so really what it comes from, in my experience, is working on site, seeing how things are made, seeing how contractors want to build buildings. So we roll up our sleeves and we enjoy building buildings as much as drawing buildings, because the practical realities of making, this better than anyone else. An architect might have this fantastic cantilever structure and might not have thought about how to do it. It comes from experience of knowing what might be happening on site and how you address construction issues when you've got the pen in your hand. So not drawing things that are just completely crazy and leaving it someone else to understand, at least having an idea of how you might be able to see these grand designs coming to life in reality.
Which is mean like working very closely with the contractor and
working closely with the contractor is essential. I mean, often we've done projects where where we're designing projects with the contractor from day one, and that can add amazing value for a client, especially local authority work, because you're building in practicality into the design as you go along. And as long as people understand that there has to be an imaginative element to everything you do, and everyone's responsible about how they engage in a design process, that is a very good way to procure a building.
Good. One more question we have. What role does sustainability play in your work?
Sustainability?
Yes.
Is essential. We did a project now for, it was our housing association, which is actually Homes for the 21st Century, it was called. So we produced houses 25 years ago where the challenge was to be kind of self-sufficient with energy, and we built them, and they were. And so we were doing social housing, where the heating costs 20 years ago were about £140 a year. So we've always had sustainability as at the heart of the way we design. If it's a client's initiative, but we say that our profession likes us to push those initiatives. So we will always try and say to a client, well, look, have you seen that this technology has come onto this level, so you really should be including it in your buildings now. So it's not just technology; it's the construction materials and how you put them together. So we've done lots of schools and Sure Start nurseries where they're very simple materials: plasterboard, OSB, breather membranes, full fill insulation, timber stud, for example, that has an 80-year lifespan. But it's how you put those materials together to get the sustainability. So it's not always the grand idea. It's often using old school technologies, but it's how you put them together.
That's good.
Mm.
As you see every day, the technology is getting bigger and
Yes.
bigger. How is the technology changing the field of the architecture?
Okay, so what's fascinating about what you say is, we do a lot of heritage work. So
Yes.
we're working on a 12th century building at the moment. So how does technology help us with a 12th century building? You'd be amazed. So when we get, say, like a rubble flint wall, and it's got issues with condensation or leaking or something like that, we use mapping technologies, for example, where we can see every pocket of water in that wall. And then we know that if we can understand why there are pockets of water that are destroying the mortar, for example. So then we know where to upgrade mortar, lime mortar that breathes and things like that. So you'd be surprised. We get some surveys that give us clear crystal 3D dimensions of every single piece of, if it's cornice or and how timbers are jointed. And then we make 3D models out of these. So we can get 3D representations of ancient buildings and analyze them in that way. But on the flip side of that, we have all AI and we have, the CGI technologies, and we have all this new world, this new frontier, which is creeping into our business now. And we're embracing it whenever we can. How and why? It's to be more informative as to the solutions we provide. So it's a tool for gathering information so we can get the right solutions. And then in terms of CGI and representation and 3D building management and object management and BIM and things like that, it's coordinating all things all in one electronic place. So it's not in a drawer by the at the end of the office, whereas it used to be A1 drawers. So you'd pull the drawers out and there were the A1 drawings. It's about an electronic model. And the use of that is that future management, where you have buildings that need lots and lots of project management in terms of maintenance, they have all the information there. And then it leads onto your phone. So on your phone, with 3D and with intelligence packages, you point your phone at anything and it will tell you what the product is. It will tell you what the fuse board is, when it's going out of date. So you can actually point your phone at the world and it will tell you what you're looking at in terms of its object technology.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's a great new future for construction. Definitely.
Yeah. Are there any architectural trends you are excited about right now?
Yeah, there are. I mean, there's lots. Look, I'm a buildings geek, Costa. So I grew up with buildings. So I love buildings. And so I could answer that in lots of different ways. So I guess the most difficult response, and this is completely unrehearsed, in planning at the moment, there's this concept of what is intangible. So everyone can see a glass is a glass and what it's made out of, but not everyone can see what makes a place and what gives value to a place. And in the planning process, placemaking is becoming more understood than it used to be. We've always had it in our hearts because we think we know what makes places valuable to people. But there's something intangible that you can't put your finger on, where people say, yeah, I'll go and meet you there. Or why don't we do that? Or isn't this a great place to be? Or it's because my grandfather used to work here. Or this is because this church used to be, or whatever it is. And so the cultural context of planning and understanding what's important to local people is a trend that I'm very, very interested in examining and being part of in the future.
That's great. That's great. That sounds very good, actually.
Yeah.
What's a common misconception on people have about architects?
It's got to be the classic one. I mean, architecture is a club. If you're a part of the RIBA, it's sometimes thought of as being maybe too male, and there's not enough of a woman's voice or female voice in architecture. It's kind of a middle classy type thing. Architects may be seen to be a bit possessive or a bit uptight about what they do. So there's lots of different, maybe they're negative connotations of architects, but then, you get positive ones where maybe mavericks, maybe people that are individual thinkers, people that think out of the box. So, architecture is a profession. It's a mixed bag, very colorful bag. I don't quite know how to answer the rest of that question.
No, it's a great answer. It's a great answer.
Well, I'm interested to know more from you. I mean, what's your
my opinion about architects?
Yeah, your
I have
perception of them.
A great perception. The reason it is because without them, you can't bring to life actually a piece of land. Without them, you can't transform a house. And without them, you can't bring the vision of the client to life, because even if the client knows exactly what you want, you can't bring it to life, because a builder can't deliver just a vision when it's not something on the drawings or something to work together, actually.
Yeah.
Because, on my opinion, an architect with a builder, the clients, designers, they make a team actually to deliver the project. One of them can't deliver it, so they work as a team, which the architect is the first wheel of that. Will.
Costello, forget everything I said. I should have said what you've just said. You answered
No.
perfectly.
That's my opinion. Yeah, that's my opinion. Which I
No, I wish I had answered it like that. I think that is actually true. I mean, it is elusive to make a vision happen, and sometimes people will stand back and say, "Wow." The process sometimes can be a bumpy ride, but if you've got the trust and you go through with it, there's always a positive outcome, I think.
And as you know, after all your years of experience and everything, it's challenges all the time. There are frustration all the time. There are bumps all the time on the project. It's not easy, stressful. But I know all the time on the projects we work together as well, it's actually the outcome and the satisfaction you see on the client's face once you hand over to them the job. That's actually which is giving to us the push.
Absolutely. I've had projects where people have been kind to say to me that they've actually changed their lives because, for an example, a domestic client, and you go in and you interview them for the first time and try and catch a brief, and you find that they're all in different rooms on their own and things like this. And then you design a place where they can eat together, they have breakfast together, where they study together, where they work together. And I've had projects where people have said, actually, at the end of this, my family life has been liberated by the spaces that have been created. So that's quite gratifying when you can get to that stage with projects.
That's what I see all the time.
Yeah.
And for me, architects make a big imprint onto my life, on my experience, onto my construction side and everything. Because now when I'm going, because I've been working with you and other architects, over the years, it just make me to visualize exactly with the eye of an architect.
Yeah,
what they're looking for. Which I'm going to a house, I can see actually, sitting on the kitchen, cooking, the wife. Then I can see the husband watching football in the living room. Right. Then the kids on the playroom. So when we're creating the houses, actually, I can see and visualize everything, how it's going to be a family home. That's all.
Yeah.
So that's but for me, it's very important. The architects are very, very important one, because without the architects, a land is just a land.
Do you ever look at architects' drawings and think, I'm not sure this is right? What this is? Do you think this might not be what the architect thinks it might end up with? West Common is a good example. I mean, it was what a dreadful house we inherited from the client who didn't want to live there.
Yeah.
But we've done so much to it that I'm not sure many people could have seen exactly what the vision was going to be at the end of the day. It's quite a surprise sometimes.
The vision you had, it's a great vision. And after you put the 3D plans
exactly
and the vision, it's clear what's going to be that house.
Yeah.
But actually, because we work so long together now, I can see on your drawings, I can see the vision you have.
What we're trying to do.
And I'm sure the clients you're working with all the time, they will see the vision afterward, because they're coming with ideas and everything. But when you present it to them, and that's why they need an architect actually all the time on the project. Brilliant. West Common is going to be a great project.
Yeah,
it's going to be wonderful, and actually we're going to share some. Yeah,
not far
it's
off
going to
now.
It's going to be a great one. Once we discuss the project, what was the most challenging project you have working on? You have been working on?
Both ends of the extreme, really. So the personal ones are the most difficult ones. So the house for my mother and father, which was on the Grand Designs with Kevin MacLeod, that was a challenge, because my father was trying to design his own house and found that he couldn't, and he kept on drawing plans of the Alhambra. And I said, why are you doing the Alhambra, Dad? This is crazy. You don't need an Alhambra. And so he just gave me an A4 brief written with a biro and just said, get on with it, and didn't have any real sort of criticism as the design evolved. He trusted that it would be kind of what his vision, his brief was. And so that was challenging, because, you think, well, is it really what they want? Is it really what they're going to do? And it was fantastic. So that was challenging for a personal reason. But then we've worked for big clients like Tesco, and where we did their management training center, which was on paper, it got planning, but it was the first building in the UK that would have been zero carbon in use. So we were doing all things like coppicing willow to use for generating electricity, and the in use of it was very challenging in terms of its energy demands. And that was with a big corporate structure where you're not dealing one-to-one with a client, you're dealing with committees of people, and you can't. Everything has to be inch perfect the whole way through the journey. Different cultures, I think, are the best way to answer how you adapt and understand the culture that you're working with.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer. Have you ever had a project go completely different than you planned it?
A project go completely different from a planet? Probably, well, one for my wife, I think, was one of the ones. It started off so well. No, it was good. A project that became completely different. We do get projects that change halfway through. And an example, a practical issue, for example, we did a commercial building for a client, which was shops and offices, where the client halfway through the project said, I need the floors in this building to be take a 5 kilonewton load, which is the equivalent of Wembley Stadium, And you're saying, well, why do you need that? And they were saying, well, because the marketplace is changing, and what if we have a gym? We need to have floor loads that can take any possible use for the next 200 years. So there we were with our foundations in the ground, the piling already done, building the frame above it, and then having to redesign all the structure in play once the construction had started to take a higher load. So we had to transfer structure around and use the piles that we had in a different way. So it's when you get it's a curveball, It's like you're in the crease and someone throws a ball that you're not quite sure how to manage. It was a very successful project. It was built and it was let very quickly, and incidentally was let to one of the users that this client envisaged it might need to take that load. So it was quite an interesting.
It was good, yeah. Can you share with us a funny or unexpected story from your career?
A funny or unexpected story,
yes.
Well, I was talking to you about someone who tried to give me a car that I didn't want along the way. Look, I mean, there are lots. What we pride ourselves on is that we kind of work with all types of client. And I haven't really got a story, but I can tell you that each one sometimes comes with a funny anecdote, possibly not for sharing on this podcast.
Not here, no.
So that gives you an idea of the flavor of the stories.
Yeah. If you were not to be an architect,
yes,
what would you be doing?
Well, I'd be playing number 9 for Arsenal, obviously. I mean, they need a striker at the moment, and I reckon I could get a few goals if they let me have a go. If only he gave me some 5 minutes on the pitch. That's one answer, Costel. I probably, what would I be doing? I don't know. Maybe I'd be drawing or building models, or I don't know, something. It would probably be architecture related rather than the practice of architecture. Maybe the history, or maybe something like that. I'm not quite sure. I don't think about it.
Yes, because you're doing what you love.
Yeah, it is a vocation. A lot of people sometimes take advantage of architects because what we do is we feel like we do it to contribute. So it's not always because we want our name on the drawing or we want our name on the building. When we do schools and libraries and hospitals, we think it's because they can improve people's lives, and we do that very genuinely. So, yeah, whatever I would do, I think it would be that I felt like I was contributing in some way to a wider community.
Yeah, which is great, actually.
Yeah.
I know you've been working to thousands of projects over your career, but what's your dream project that you haven't working on it?
Well, I mean, over the years, we've tended to be able and fortunate enough just to service the office in the way that we've wanted to. So we've had the work, and we haven't done competition work. We did do in the early days, and we were successful, but we just got so entrenched in doing the work we had on the board that we carried on with that. So the future for us is to start experimenting a little bit more with building types that we haven't worked on before. So we are doing a project in LA at the moment, which is going to be a combination of very old technology like rammed earth, but with CLT, construction veneered lumbers and things of that nature in a different climate. We're doing a Saudi project at the moment, which is another housing project. And then we're doing a competition for a Venetian palace. So it's kind of looking at things where we have the experience, but not for that type. So we're applying our experience to a new type of building technology or building form, building type. That's where we're going.
That's good to hear that. So you got a lot in your in your plate actually to play with.
Too much.
Yeah, it's never too much. It's never too much. Later we're gonna post actually onto the later where the people can find you. But if you can show where they can find it as well.
Yes, of course.
So that'll be great. But we'll be adding later to our comments, everything section, all the websites, name, Instagram, all the social media and everything. But Mr. Matt actually will let you know where you can find him actually.
Thank you very much, Costello. What an enjoyable experience this has been.
Yes. So if people are going to find it, they're going to find your practice.
Sorry. Okay. So where we are. So we're based in St Albans. We have an Instagram. It's Briffa Phillips, and it's info@briffaphillips.com. We're based in St Albans, so any Google search for Briffa Phillips and they'll find us.
That's very good. It's anything you can advise a young architect when he's starting, what he should prepare.
Yeah, a young architect. So the advice for a young architect is you have to be interested in everything. Advice is don't try and be a genius. Try and be good at everything. Be a good all-rounder. You need stamina and you need persistence. You need to be open-minded. And I think you alluded to it, actually, Costello. It's negotiating, working in a team, where you see your part in the team and how you see you can contribute to that team. There'll always be work for architects. I mean, we always have this joke that the profession has always been under threat. And we see it like a silver thread that goes through time. And each generation, each century tries to cut that silver thread, but they just can't get rid of us. And they can't get rid of us is because, the old adage that imagination have no refuge. There's nowhere to hide with imagination. But I would be advising young architects to follow their heart as much as their mind, and indulge themselves in creative imagination.
That's great to hear that. So I'm sure there are many young architects they want to start their career, and it's a good start actually listening your advice on it.
Yeah, I'm always anyone out there who needs some advice. We always mentor students, and we're very proud. I've mentored 30 architects now. That's my legacy, is mentoring young architects into the profession. So anyone who needs any advice is welcome to contact me.
One more question I have for you. What advice you're going to give to any contractors when they start working with an architect?
Advice for a contractor. Advice for a contractor. Architecture's practices aren't always best resourced. So architects, I think, are vulnerable because fee levels don't always pay for output levels. And I think a danger or a risk for a contractor is where an architect can't produce the information in a timely way. And so I think advice would be just to get to know your architect and to know their capabilities and their outputs. Because every architect is good and very good, but not always at for the job that you're being asked to do. So I think it would be, is this architect resourced to be the person that doesn't let me down when I need information? That's one thing.
Yeah. I just want, I got one question in the back of my head all the time.
Oh, yes. Okay.
It's all the clients you have, all the homeowners, all the developers.
Yes.
I think their first trust has to be on the architect. And do you think that's my thinking is right? Because I think when they discuss first, is the architect, they're discussing everything, all the vision, everything. and the architect is the one which is actually going to bring it actually into the life. Yes, in collaboration with the contractor and other parties.
Yeah.
But I think the architect is the one which is playing the best and the important role.
I think yes. I mean, I think there are lots of different answers, but I think generally speaking, I think you're right, Costel. The architect has a job to do to get the trust, and then the architect, for example, when you get to the contracting stage, selecting contractors, from anywhere, for example, and then managing a tender process and things of that nature. And so, yes, there has to be levels of trust where they don't question too much. Sometimes they have to let you do your job, and then you can guide them through projects, because you hear of projects that are overpriced or go over budget or a late delivery. But if the architect, if they place the trust in a professional that is coordinating the glue for everything, that's where you need the trust, and then we take all the headaches away from people, and then the projects are successful. So it's actually when there's a breakdown in trust in the architect sometimes that can lead to you being tripped up down the road through a project. When people change architects, for example, halfway through, and you think, well, why did you do that? I mean, yeah, exactly. Or sometimes when contractors are changed or things like that. So yeah, I think you're probably right. Again, I mean, we say client agent. I don't want to talk architects down too much, but the client agent role doesn't need to be an architect, but that is the primary contact and the person you need to trust. Yeah.
But on my opinion, all the time I'm like this. Yes, it doesn't need to be the architect.
Yeah.
But I think if he did all the hard work to get everything ready to the construction, I think he's the right person to manage for you and to be the middle, man in a way, between the client and the contractor.
Yeah.
Because along the way, if the contractor doesn't see the vision of the architect, and the architect is not in the project anymore, you can't deliver what the vision was.
No, Costello, I totally agree with that. And there are practical issues about that as well, because it is a process from the sketch, from the inception, from the idea to handing over. And the actual stop and start of each sequence overlaps. So when an architect, let's say, is only used for planning and not for the building regulations and the construction and procurement, for example, there are gaps in the process, and there is danger in those gaps. Yes. So people can end up projects going over time, over budget, because things have been forgotten about that come back. And so some architects won't work for clients where they only do the planning. Some architects insist on being the whole process. And we always prefer it when we're engaged for the whole process. It's more rewarding at the end of the day.
That's because, you see the final product actually, and what way you're spending hours and hours. Drawings, everything.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the pride actually seeing the final product.
Exactly. And the worst thing is when you see all the ideas watered down or misunderstood, because you have to defend your baby as you go through the project. You have to fight for your child. And so sometimes, if that's lost, you just get the very diluted version of what it could be. So a lot of the time it's a missed opportunity when you change or when you chop and change how you procure a building.
Yeah. And one advice in a way, because I know apart from what you love to do, which is architecture, I know you're doing some developments on the side.
Yes.
Which is your passion as well.
Yes, no. So we've been lucky enough to have done developments for a number of years now, and that brings a new challenge as well for an architect, because you have to understand a whole different way of designing and building buildings, because they're not necessarily a bespoke project for someone that you know very well. They're often for someone that you've never met, for example. So it's it's just managing your own expectations, and it's a whole different discipline. You know yourself, Costel. You know yourself.
I know it. I know it. I just want to hear it from you.
Yeah,
you have years of experience.
Architects always, they'll cry into their beer in a pub that they've made people lots of money by getting planning applications. As soon as you development work, you realise that architects are very, very important. But actually, there's a whole different skill set to making a development work. A lot of it's in legals. Understanding legals. And you asked me what else I would do. I would have loved to have been a lawyer, actually. So I actually really love the legal side of development, because sometimes there's little nuggets of gold in the fact that someone hasn't got the right access, but you can get them that access. Now, I see that as a challenge, a creative challenge, to clear a site of a can of worms of legal issues. So there are things of that nature in a development, but there's also the management of money and time, and a lot of people just aren't able to, or haven't got the facilities to be very pragmatic about managing finance. So you finished your project and you think it's going to sell in 2 weeks, and it sells in 6 months, and are you financing that, and how does that work? So I think it's a whole different layer of skill when you're working in a market that isn't stable or can go up and down. So there's lots of different elements to it that are very different from literally designing buildings.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. It's just for me, if we can give an advice to say to any future big developers, because I know for sure developers say, oh yeah, I'm going to get that land. I'm going to, I got some money. I'm going to be a developer because I'm going to jump on it. But actually, it's not that easy because, they will need an architect, which they don't want to spend too much on, money on architect. But the architect is the important one to get what they want to get.
Yeah.
And if you just, roughly just the bullet points, actually bullet steps in a way from getting a land.
Yeah. Well, the frontline advice for that is that obviously land comes at a price.
Oh, yes.
And if you own it, you've got an obligation, let's say, to see that it goes, if you're selling it, sells for the highest price. So it depends on what your business model is, whether you constantly need development or whether it can be something alongside another business. I actually think the better developers are people that might have other businesses, so they're not relying on a livelihood from development. And the reason I say that is because people that start out in development are often thinking, I'll get out of my life to do development, because they think there's glory or pots of gold at the end of the rainbow. Yeah. But often there isn't. And what that does is it creates sometimes a panic to buy land at too high a price. So the golden rule for anybody wanting to start development is to buy your land at the right price. Listen to a planning consultant or your architect, because we do all our own planning consultancy, because we trust ourselves to do that. And we're modest with the expectation. So when someone says, we'll get 8 houses, and I think, look, I can't get him 3. Okay. And he says, well, work a bit harder to get me 8. And I said, look, I can work all week, but you're still getting 3. Listen to that 3. And what is it that that 3 is? Does it work with the land value once you've got all your other costs? Because most people underestimate the actual cost that it takes. Most people overvalue the profit at the end of a development. And when they look at, we call it the post-mortem on the death, when they do their analysis of how it worked, it's often not the expectation that they wanted, because you've got to overcome the problems, and those problems cost money as you go along. So start on the right foot, buy the land at the right price, and make sure, and this is quite elusive, and a lot of architects don't understand this, but seasoned property developers obviously do. Make sure that every square foot that you're selling is paying for itself, i.e., don't build a 2,000 square foot house where the ceiling in that road is for a 1,400 square foot house. Yeah. An architect will want to build the grand hall and all of this stuff. And we do put in the lovely things, don't get me wrong, but you've got to put in the joy and the love to get it out, rather than just cardboard boxes. But make sure that you're not providing something which just won't hit the right value. And in property development, every street, believe it or not, can have a completely different value. Oh, yeah. So it's working at the very granular level of understanding what the market can bear, because everyone thinks they can buck the trend. But it's very rare that you can actually buck the trend of house values in an area. You're doing really very well if you can do that.
Yep. Yeah, that's a very good advice actually for everyone which wants to get into the property. And like you said earlier, never leave your another businesses just to get into the properties, because it's not going to be the right path in a way.
Yeah. You almost need to do it as a side and build that up alongside your bread and butter, I think. Yeah. And then build it up slowly. And then, a lot of people, have the fantasy of having projects in planning, then projects on site, and projects in sales. That's actually a very nice thing if you can achieve it, but very rare, because the world doesn't work to your order, does it? So you end up with 5 in planning, nothing on site, and then in 3 years' time, 5 on site. And, so to have a conveyor belt different stages of the work is something that if you can achieve that, you're doing really well.
That's great. Thank you very much for your answers. Mr. Matt, as we discussed earlier, with the clients, how an architect can help actually the clients with the planning permission in a way and make the process very smoothly.
Okay. Well, obviously, planning is a massive discussion, and it's been possibly, it's a challenging environment. So, how can an architect help? Well, I think a lot of it is managing expectations, and the reason for that is because you think that there are policies. There are policies that determine how you use a building, the type of building, where it is, what it should look like. And these are all local government policies. And they're supplemented with national government guidance. And so whilst an architect can work alongside a planning consultant, and that works very successfully, I do think that a good architect should understand the policy context that their client's land or property is in. So an initial stage would be to do a feasibility to say these are the constraints that you find your building in. So, for example, is it a 1950s house in a conservation area where everything else is made out of Portland stone or something like that? Is it a protected property? Is the road protected? Is there, special policies that says you have to have sizes of amenity, issues with overlooking, whatever it might be, actually. So it's understanding the policy context. Now, the problem that we have is that we do understand the policy context, but the way that the applications are received, they're not always managed in a way that responds to what we think the policies are. So a misconception for a lot of clients will say, if an architect doesn't get a planning permission, it's like, well, didn't you understand the policies? And you say, well, no, it's just that their interpretation of the policies is different from ours. Now, 9 out of 10 times, a client will want more than the policies allow them to have. So a lot of it is managing their expectations or actually overperforming and saying, well, look, I mean, the policies allow you to do A, B, and C, but we think you've got a way where you can actually food permitted development, for example. Double the size of the buildings on your site without even going for planning permission. So it comes back to understanding the policy constraints and then having the nerve to pitch it in a way that you think that a local authority will judge whether they can actually sustain an appeal if they refuse that. So there's a lot of issues around planning and how you negotiate the planning process. The nuts and bolts of it is that the planning process doesn't deliver any certainty. If we had a planning system like you get in Europe, which says that we'll give you the permission and then we'll talk about the design. Sometimes in this country, you'll get a refusal because they don't like the design, but the principle is okay. So if there was more certainty in the planning process, I think that clients would invest more money in the design elements of it or the quality of the projects because they know they're going to get an outcome. They don't know quite what it is, but they know they're going to get something out of it. So an architect will guide you through your expectations for what your brief is within the policy constraints that surround your property and land.
So that's why any homeowner or any developer or anyone who want to do a planning, they should hire the architect and should hire the best one actually. So they make sure actually they're getting what they need to get actually.
Yeah, exactly. I think that there's no shame in, we alluded to it earlier. If you have land and you want to develop, a lot of people don't realize that the Planning Act, the whole ethos of the Planning Act is to allow development. But the way that it's received culturally over generations since the war, because it's the Act has been there since the 40s and hasn't changed for a long time. The way people think of it, and sometimes bureaucrats and sometimes planning officers, God bless them. I know most of them do a very good job, but some of them think it's a way to stop development. And sometimes a lot of local councils think that what the government are asking them to do is to actually stop development. But the whole ethos of the Planning Act is to allow people to develop their land. Yeah.
Is the planning regulation recently been changed?
Well, planning is always changed because basically every district has its own agenda, its own local plan. And the government asked that plan to be up to date with what they perceive to be the needs of that local place. Now, often in this country, for the right reasons, it's called democracy actually, often for the right reasons, those plans become out of date, or they can't deliver what the government want them to deliver. And so then you get a lot of friction between government and councils, where the government say, you are the new jet engine of our economy. Building is one of the ways we can build our way out of recession. We did it in the 50s and 60s. The Germans have been very good at doing it over the decades. And so how do we enable that? And the government come up with really very, very good initiatives to enable development, but they come up against a brick wall of local people who don't want the development where they want it.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of politics in the country at the moment, and there's always a debate. But I do think people should realise that the Planning Act, when it's looked at historically, let's say we fast forward 150 years, I would bet that we see how many billions and billions of pounds we've lost because of our Planning Act. The country is in a far worse state because of the current Planning Act.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
No, that's good. If we're discussing about the planning, do you have, no, actually you have, because I know you have it, but I know you have a vast experience with the listed buildings. And how do you do to tackle that? Because I know you're working on a few of them.
Yeah, we love listed buildings. And so I'm really fortunate. I've done maybe over 120 listed buildings in my career. And we're very lucky to be working on this one, which is an old palace. It was a Plantagenet palace. So it was Edward I that commissioned it. And how do we tackle those? It's like having intensive care, basically. You have a patient in intensive care and you realize that you can't fight a listed building. You can't change or necessarily change it or want it to be something else. It can have a new life, but it can't necessarily be something else. So you have to be a little bit like Sherlock Holmes in terms of the building technology. You have to understand, why is that piece of timber rotten and why is that like that? Why is there damp there and why is there condensation there? It's not always obvious. And in fact, it's very technically, every specialism from lime mortar to specialist renders or whatever material you might work with over the ages, is very specialist. But the key to working with listed buildings and in conservation areas is work with the building. And don't try, and it's not preservation, it's repair. So the beauty of listed buildings is the scars that they wear over time. You don't want a listed building to look brand new. You want it to wear its age, wear its generations, because that's what you feel. So listed buildings are wonderful because they communicate the people of the past, the centuries, our culture over generations, and their value is immense. We lose far too many listed buildings in this country through the planning process, where people won't take on a listed building because it might take 5 or 6 years just to get the approvals to refurbish it, because sometimes people want to protect every element of a listed building, but there's a judgment to be made of where is value and where is significance. So you need to all be very grown up around a table to understand the significance of the building, not to restore it, but to repair it and polish it for the next generation to enjoy. So the beauty of listed buildings is to give them to the next generation.
Yeah, and I know you're working on that.
Yes, we're very excited to do that.
Yeah. What's the most difficult planning permission you ever had, and what's the longest planning permission you ever had?
Oh my word! The most difficult planning application. They're all
There was many.
They're all really, really difficult. I can't pick one, Costel. They all come with challenges. Because you've got policies with planning. Sometimes it's the idea that gets the planning, and then it's how you might interpret a policy in a different way that gets the planning. And so sometimes it's just unlocking that. There's not a formula for it. It's actually it's a bit like a magic process. How do you find that little gem that people can buy into? So the longest planning application, well, I think the longest one that I've dealt with was probably 9 years, and that was for a listed building. And it's a good example, actually. It was for the cathedral in St Albans that had a building where they had a commercial use on the ground floor and they had residential use on the 2 top floors. but they had to go through the shop to access the residential use. And so they could never let their building or make the building as valuable as it could be to repair it, because you've got to maintain listed buildings. So we had an idea that there was a little bit of the back of the building that we could knock the wall out just to create a door on the first floor, and we could access the two top floors. So we could separate the uses just by taking a little bit of historic brickwork out. Taking that historic brickwork out took about 9 years. But once we did it and it was allowed, it's won awards and it's fully let, and the shop is viable, and there are people living upstairs, so the building's got its new life back.
That's great to hear that. That's great to hear that. That's a long run, which is showing how dedicated you are and how much you appreciate in the listed building, actually.
Yeah, well, we're doing other projects. There's a building that we've had where in the process, it's another listed building, in the process of, it's taken probably about 5 years, and we haven't got permission yet. But it's suffered arson attacks, 2 arson attacks now, because it's vulnerable. So the problem we've got with listed buildings is, and the length they take time through planning, which was your question, they're difficult ones because they take so long. There's a vulnerability in those buildings, and we can lose the buildings in the time that it takes us to get the permissions.
Yeah,
which is very sad. Yeah,
I know, because there's great buildings around, England and London, actually. St. Albans, actually.
There's lots of buildings at risk. There's lots and lots of buildings at risk. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah.
You know the answer anyway.
Yeah, to answer a question, for example, if you were to ask me what benefits an architect brought to a project, I would say that, an architect, a qualified architect, first off, that they've done their education, and maybe they're part of an institution like the RIBA. They follow a plan of work. And the plan of work very clearly says what each stage might be. So inception, sketch design. And so the value of an architect is to be able to collect the client's brief and requirements at each stage. And so at the end of each stage, there's a retrospective review of where you've got to. So there's a constant feedback loop. So where you start a journey with a client, you might think you're going to an end game, an end place, but it might not be. You might not know where you're going. But because the service is broken into component parts, it allows the client to assess where they are at any one stage. So, for example, you as a contractor, Costello, you know all of this. Can it be technically delivered? What are the chances of planning? What does it cost? Yeah. And so often we say to a client, well, what's your budget? And they don't want to tell us their budget because they think you'll spend their budget.
Yeah.
But the real value of an architect, and people really don't appreciate this, is we're asking what their budget is because we think we can save them money, not spend their money. We think that if we offer them a particular construction method where they might have envisaged building out a marble and we're building out a timber, as an example, I know that's a silly example, but we can suggest things because we've got the breathing spaces between each component part of the project to allow them to assess it. And they might say at stage 4, when they've got their planning, well, let's review the cost now. And then that stage before they've engaged with the contractor, or sometimes with a contractor in negotiation, you can say, well, I've got £500,000 to spend on this project, but actually things haven't gone so well for me and I've only got 380 now. Yeah. What can you do as a team now to challenge that? And so as the project proceeds, we can manage change for them, whether that's the change in the design, but also whether it's the change in the cost of their project and the deliverability of it. So I think that would be, where an architect can add value that people might not necessarily see.
Yeah, because I find all the time actually for our clients, and I mean, you find the same thing. When you ask them actually the budget, because for us, you just ask the budget to don't send the price and then say, oh, it's too high, or, just to have discussions after. The reason we ask actually the budget, it's actually to see if we can deliver it on that budget.
Exactly.
And to come with this right advice to them.
Exactly.
What to do.
Yeah.
Maybe, certain things we can look where we can do the value engineering, where we can save on it.
Yeah.
If they don't going to share the budget with us, we can't actually make it to work in a way.
Exactly.
And what I find in my years of experience, they go to another contractor which can say, oh, this is the price. And actually it's under their budget.
Yeah.
But on the end, because they are not using the architect, they're just dealing with a contractor, what they're going to find on the end is actually going to spend more than what their budget was.
Exactly right.
Or the falling out.
Yeah, no, exactly right. So you're in a difficult position, as same as we are, in that your competition might say that it can be done for a price, but when the actual detail is known, or they can add the price. So you're right. Sometimes where you have a contractual arrangement, which you should always have when you do a building project, it's good that all the information is known within a budget expectation. So every time I use my pen, I spend money, a client's money, whatever I draw. But if they tell me more or less where their budget is, I can sharpen my pencil before it even gets to a contractor. And then we work with you guys to bring the best value to how to bring that forward. And your projects, Costel, always come in on budget. It's only the clients that, when I've worked with you in the past, it's only the clients that add to the budget. But your projects always come in on budget, which is why we like working with you.
Yeah, because the way we like to work is actually we don't want to change the price because it's going to create frustration for everyone, and we don't want to create anything actually. That's why I want to have a fixed price from the beginning.
Exactly.
Consider that. But as you know, I know along the way the clients come changing things or adding things. Then that's the price is changing because it's not in our control anyway.
Yeah.
But if we know exactly what it is, that's why I was saying earlier, the most important part for me is actually a client should have an architect to design everything and to agree everything before it's going to a contractor.
Yeah.
Because then this is what's going to be, this is our budget, this is what you deliver, and not come to change along the way.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's for me all the time. I'm trying to convince all the clients which I'm meeting. It's best to have an architect because the architect is going to, save you money in a way, but it's not just save you money. It's actually going to protect you for everything.
That's right. I mean, what you're describing, Costel, is music to my ears because really that's what we call traditional procurement, where we are paid as an architect to deliver a package of information that can be market tested. And you might spend money on an architect's fee. So a client might think, oh, that's way too expensive. Why am I spending all that money? But if they go to something like more fashionable, they're not, whether they're fashionable, everything swings and roundabouts. But let's just say design and build, where a contractor says, I'll give you a house for £500,000. What the client doesn't see is they don't see that the house is costing, say, £200,000. So where's that £300,000 going? So if a client was to spend a percentage of that £300,000 on an architect, they will get £500,000 of value, not the £200,000, with someone taking the rest away from them. So working with an architect traditionally, it's getting the value for the client with the contractor. It's not allowing the client to receive anything the contractor gives them for a price. So that's music to my ears.
That's what I'm saying all the time because I'm going to see many clients every day. But every day it's like when I'm meeting the clients, oh, can you work directly with you? I say, yes, no problem at all with us. We can work it. We're going to have the contract. We can have everything. But who did the drawing? So, the architect. Right. But why don't use him in a way? Because it's going to be, once you start, you're going to come back with questions because maybe something is not clear there.
Yeah.
So it's best to have the architect along your side, the whole process, which is going to act like a contractor administrator as well, which you're going to be in safe hands.
Yeah.
Because we are a contractor, yes, we can deliver everything. That's no problem at all.
Yeah.
But the architect working with us is the perfect team to create your house.
Exactly. And I think that, again, it's a minefield for private clients to embark on all the intricacies of how you do those things. But again, people may not realize that when an architect becomes a contract administrator, where they have a set of drawings that have been priced and the contractor's on board and they administrate that contract. So they certify the work, they look at the valuations. They have to listen to both sides. So they can't just listen to the client who's paying them after all. They have to listen to the contractor. So where it becomes extensions of time or protecting, prelims on a project, the arbitration of that is with the contract administrator. So it's almost like being a judge, let's say, between two parties, like a party wall surveyor. And so that's why it's useful for both sides if they enter it in that spirit. And sometimes I've had to say to my clients, no, we have to sign this and he's due this and it has to finish now, and they don't like it, but that's what the contract says.
Yeah, I know that and understand it completely. It's just, we want to make, the clients, we have a respect for them. We want to deliver the house and everything. It's just some of the architects, if the architect working longer with the contractor, they think, oh, they're working together. And it's not that way because very clearly.
Yeah.
We work in many projects together, but you are like on client side looking to save anything what you can save for the clients. And you're very sharp with us whenever it's something. So it has to be, that's the way it is. And that's why the clients need to respect the architect and get him to be next to their side all the way to the process, to the finish.
You're right. A lot of the time that the client thinks you're too close to the contractor and the contractor thinks you're too close to the client. But a well-run project that's open and where the conversations around the table through
yes.
site minutes and meetings, where everyone understands each other's pressures and understands where they come from, then everyone should trust that process.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I agree fully with that.
Yeah.
And I agree fully that the client should be closer to the architect and the contractor in a way. The reason is because he was the first person discussing about the project. He knows exactly all the hours and hours spent together to get everything put together.
Yeah.
The contractor is coming, but the contractor maybe don't know exactly what the finishings or
exactly.
all the
The
details.
expectation,
Or the expectation, which together can be delivered.
And also, Costello, I think that it's important that you have a conversation that says, I'm not client bashing, but say a client wants something done in 6 months and you sit around the table before you're in contract and you offer to the contractor, say, can you do it in 6 months? And the contractor really should be saying no. And I have to say to contractors, please, I think it's better that we all say it's 9 months. I know the client wants it in 6 months, but in all the will in the world, with procurement and supplies and getting stocks and things. So it's being realistic from the beginning is the challenge.
I know that because I was saying the 6 months all the time.
Yeah.
I know we can deliver it because but it's just all the time now recently, actually after the pandemic.
Yeah.
We had like all the time like stock because even materials procurement, like we said earlier.
Yeah.
And all the time we had to extend our programs. Actually.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is again, going back to planning, people have waited so long for their planning applications. They just want to get going. So you can understand why people want to get going. And for private clients, domestic projects, it's their life on hold. Their kids might be doing GCSEs or A-levels or whatever it might be. So it's a whole concoction of what we have to service. Yeah. But realistically, if it's all discussed and set out before you embark on it, that's the way that you should be doing it.
Yes. So everyone, you need an architect, whatever you do to your house, extend it, loft, extensions, new builds, conversions, listed buildings. Whenever you do something, you need an architect because he's going to be the one to guide you step by step on your journey, actually. And if you don't have one, you have one here now. And you can contact him anytime to help you with your project, with future projects. His expertise is very, over 35 years, 40 years on this. He got experience onto the listed building more than anyone else. On new builds, he's the perfect person to get your house from the ground up. And then he's going to guide you actually step by step on everything you want to do. And his experience, it's undescribable here because I know him and I know what he can deliver. And he's got great projects, great vision, and you'll be in very good hands.
Thank you, Costa. That's fantastic.
Thank you everyone for being here today. And thank you to Mr. Matt because you got many lessons actually you're learning today, hopefully from him. If you want to ask any question or anything, you can go down into the comments and ask a question. I'll be happy, both of us, to answer to them. If in future, like I said earlier, you need advice from architects or you need you got listed building, new builds, then Briffa Phillips on St. Alban, which the website is going to be in the link below. You can get in touch with them and they'll be more than happy actually to help you. Mr. Matt actually is going to be the person actually which is going to have a one-to-one with you to understand your needs actually. Before that, he's going to have one of his team actually just to ask a few questions about your project before he's going to have one-to-one with you. But I'm sure you're going to be in very, very good hands. And wherever project you have on constructions, he's the best architect into St. Alban, all London, and any other surrounding. And I'll just going to say to you, bring your comments down here and let's make your new build together. Let's make actually a new listed building together to bring them to life, to see, to be what was 100 years ago. So I'll say to all of you, thank you very much for being here with us today. Thank you to Mr. Matt, and I'll see you also shortly.